The cruiser rolled to a stop at the corner of 5th and Madison, hazard lights blinking in the early morning drizzle. Officer Dale Hutchins had been on the force for 19 years, and in 19 years he had developed what he called instincts and what everyone else called something uglier. He spotted her from half a block away, a black woman in her mid-40s, standing beside a silver Mercedes S-Class, phone pressed to her ear, dressed in a tailored charcoal blazer and heels that had no business being out in this weather. Something about the picture didn't sit right with him. The car was too nice. The neighborhood was too nice. The math, in his small and cluttered mind, did not add up. He pulled over and stepped out without calling it in. She saw him coming and finished her sentence into the phone. "I'll be there by 8. Tell Marcus to have the briefing ready." She lowered the phone and looked at him with the particular patience of a woman who had been through this before. "Morning," Hutchins said, thumbs hooked into his belt. "This your vehicle?" "It is," she said. "You got ID?" "Do I need it? I'm standing next to my car making a phone call." "I'm going to need you to not give me attitude right now." Her name was Dr. Renee Caldwell. She did not tell him that yet. She reached into her bag slowly, deliberately, the way black people learn to move around police, telegraphing every motion, keeping everything visible, making herself as unthreatening as the situation required even though she was the one who had done nothing wrong. She produced her driver's license and held it out. Hutchins took it, looked at it longer than necessary. "Says here you live in Brookfield." "I do." "Long way from home." "I work downtown." "I was taking a call before I got back in the car." "Is that a problem, officer?" She glanced at his badge. "Hutchins." He didn't like the way she said his name. Measured. Like she was filing it away. "I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle." She blinked. "Just once." "Why?" "Routine check." "You haven't told me what I've done." "I don't need to have done anything for a routine check." "Actually," she said quietly, "you do." That was when he put his hand on her arm. It was not a grab. It was not a shove. But it was contact, uninvited, unnecessary, the kind of thing that gets written up as a light physical redirect in a report and experienced as something entirely different by the person on the receiving end. Renee looked down at his hand on her sleeve and then looked up at him with an expression that had gone completely, dangerously calm. "Remove your hand," she said. He didn't, right away. He let it linger for exactly 1 second too long, the way men like him did when they wanted to remind you of something. Then he let go. "I'm going to run your plates," he said. "You do that." He walked back to the cruiser. She stood in the rain and breathed. A woman walking her dog crossed the street to avoid them, then stopped, then took out her phone. Renee noticed. She didn't ask her to stop. Let it be documented, she thought. Let everything be documented. Hutchins ran the plates. The car came back clean, registered to Renee A. Caldwell, Brookfield address, no flags. He sat for a moment in his cruiser with the engine running and the radio murmuring and the slow understanding beginning to work its way through him that he had stopped a woman for standing next to her own car. He had touched her. He had run her plates. And she had just stood there in the rain and taken it with an expression on her face he couldn't quite name. He got back out. "Everything checks out," he said. "I know it does. You're free to go." She didn't move. "I want your badge number." He felt something shift in his chest. "I told you, everything's fine." "Your badge number, Officer Hutchins. For my records." He gave it to her. She typed it into her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, efficiently, like a woman used to processing information and storing it correctly. "Thank you," she said. "Look, if I came across as..." "Don't," she said. Just the one word. She got into the Mercedes, pulled the door shut, and drove away. He didn't think about it again until Tuesday. Tuesday morning, the whole precinct got the memo about the new deputy commissioner. It happened sometimes. Reshuffling at the top, new faces in the glass offices, people you'd never seen before suddenly holding authority over everything. Hutchins read the memo the way he read most paperwork, halfway and sideways, retaining only the name. Dr. Renee A. Caldwell, Deputy Commissioner, Office of Professional Standards. He read it again. He looked at the photo attached to the department announcement. The tailored blazer. The calm expression. The rain. He sat very still at his desk for a long moment. Around him the precinct continued its morning. coffee machines and complaint forms, and the low bureaucratic hum of a building full of people going about their business. His partner Delray dropped a Danish on his desk and said something about the game last night, and Hutchins didn't hear a word of it. He was doing arithmetic. He was counting days. He was remembering a hand on a sleeve and a woman who had not looked afraid, not for a single second, who had stood in the rain and typed his badge number into her phone with the precise, deliberate calm of someone who already knew exactly what she was going to do with it. Office of Professional Standards. That was the office that reviewed use of force complaints. Misconduct investigations. Officer-involved incidents. That was the office that could end careers. The summons came on Thursday. Not a complaint exactly, a meeting request, formal, routed through the captain's office, which meant the captain had already seen it and was already keeping a very careful distance from whatever this was. Hutchins knocked on the door of the third-floor conference room at 9:15 and pushed it open. She was sitting at the head of the table. Different blazer today, navy. Same expression. Across from her sat a woman from HR and a man Hutchins recognized from legal. "Officer Hutchins," Dr. Caldwell said. "Sit down." "He Saturday. I want to be very straightforward with you about what this meeting is," she said. "On the morning of April 3rd, you conducted a stop of a civilian, me, with no probable cause. You demanded identification. You requested I step away from my vehicle. You initiated uninvited physical contact. All of this is on record, including footage from a bystander that has since been submitted through appropriate channels." She folded her hands on the table. "What I want to know from you, today, in this room, is whether there is any explanation for your conduct that I have not yet considered." Hutchins had spent 2 days thinking about what he would say if this moment came. He had thought about explaining instinct. He had thought about 19 years on the job. He had thought about the neighborhood and the car and the way something hadn't sat right. And sitting across from her now, watching her wait, he understood that every explanation he had was exactly the problem. "No, he said. "There isn't." Something in her expression acknowledged this. Not satisfaction. Not triumph. Something older and quieter than either of those. "This office takes complaints seriously," she said. "It takes them especially seriously when the officer in question has 17 prior complaints in their file with patterns similar to what I experienced personally." She opened the folder in front of her. He hadn't noticed the folder until now. It was thick. "You will be placed on administrative duty pending a full review. You will cooperate fully with that review. And I want you to understand something, Officer Hutchins, not as your superior, but as the woman who stood in the rain on Tuesday morning and waited while you decided whether her car was too nice for her to own." She looked at him directly. "I have been that woman my entire career. I have been stopped, questioned, doubted, and talked over in rooms like this one and in parking garages and in restaurants and at the doors of buildings where I was the one who owned the keys. I did not get to this chair by accident, and I did not build this office to let what happened to me keep happening to other people who don't have the badge number of the officer memorized before they even get back in the car." She closed the folder. "This review will be thorough. What happens at the end of it will be fair. More than fair, which is more than I can say for what happened on that corner." She nodded to the HR rep. The meeting moved forward into documentation and process and the language of formal procedure. Hutchins answered what he was asked. He signed where he was directed to sign. When it was over, he stood in the hallway outside the conference room while people walked past him carrying coffee and folders and the ordinary weight of their working day. He thought about instinct. He thought about 19 years. He thought about a woman who had not moved, not flinched, had stood in the rain and typed with quiet, absolute certainty, because she already knew something he was only now beginning to understand. That the math had never been the problem. Hutchins had been on administrative duty before, twice, both times for complaints that got buried under paperwork and procedure and the quiet solidarity of a precinct that looked after its own. He had expected this to go the same way. He had expected the folder to get thin, the timeline to stretch, the whole thing to eventually dissolve into a written warning and a reassignment and a conversation with the captain that ended with a handshake and an understanding. That was not what happened. Every morning he reported to the third floor and sat behind a desk processing permit applications and noise complaints and the administrative overflow nobody else wanted. Every afternoon he watched the clock. Every evening he drove home to his house in Garfield Heights and sat in front of the television without watching it, turning things over in his mind the way you turn a stone in your hand when you already know what's under it and keep checking anyway. His wife Karen asked him twice what was wrong. He said work stuff both times. She stopped asking. His partner Del Rey came by the desk on the fourth day and leaned against the petition and said the guys thought the whole thing was a witch hunt, that the new deputy commissioner had an agenda, that this was exactly what happened when politics got into policing. Hutchins listened and nodded and said nothing, because nodding was easier than explaining that he had read his own complaint file the night before, really read it, all 17 prior entries, front to back, and had not been able to find much in it that surprised him. A 2019 stop of a Honduran man walking home from a night shift. A 2021 incident involving a college student whose crime had been sitting in a parked car outside a library. 3 complaints from the same block in the East Side over 14 months, all dismissed, all involving residents who were black, all flagged as suspicious for reasons that dissolved the moment you looked at them clearly. 17 complaints. 0 sustained findings. A perfect record of consequences never arriving. He put the file down and stared at his kitchen table for a long time. The investigator assigned to his case was a woman named Sandra Obi, mid-30s, precise, unhurried. She interviewed him twice in a small conference room on the second floor. She did not seem hostile. She did not seem sympathetic. She asked questions and wrote down his answers and asked follow-up questions that were slightly different from the ones he expected, which meant she was actually listening instead of filling in blanks she'd already decided on. The second interview, she put the bystander footage on a laptop and played it without comment. He watched himself on the screen. He watched himself get out of the cruiser and cross the sidewalk. He watched himself take the license and hold it too long. He watched himself say something. No audio on this section, but he remembered what he'd said. Routine check. He watched himself put his hand on her arm. It lasted 1 second on the footage. Maybe less. From the outside, it looked different than it had felt from the inside. From the inside, it had felt like control, like procedure, like the ordinary management of a situation. From the outside, it looked like something being done to someone who had not asked for it and had not deserved it and had nowhere to go except still. Do you want to add anything to your previous statement? Sandra Obi asked. No, he said. She nodded and wrote something down. The other thing that happened during the 3 weeks was that Hutchins started paying attention to things he had previously moved past without stopping. A black teenager waiting for a bus outside the precinct who clocked the building and adjusted his posture before the doors even opened. A woman in the permit line on the second floor who said yes sir and no sir with a flatness that was not rudeness but something more like armor. A maintenance worker he had passed in the hallway every day for 4 years whose name he did not know. He started noticing how much invisible navigation was happening around him all the time. How many small adjustments people made in his presence, or in the presence of the uniform, that he had never registered because he had never needed to. It did not feel good to notice this. It did not feel like growth or clarity or any of the words people used when they described becoming aware of something. It felt like standing in a room and realizing the walls had always been closer than you thought. He did not share this with anyone. He wouldn't have known how. The review concluded on a Friday. The findings were delivered in writing first, then in a meeting that included Sandra Obi, the HR representative, a union rep named Gerald who kept his arms crossed for the entirety of the 40 minutes, and Dr. Renee Caldwell, who sat at the head of the table again in a different blazer and the same expression. The findings were not good for him. 2 of the 17 prior complaints were being formally re-examined. The April 3rd incident was being sustained as an unjustified stop with inappropriate physical contact. He was being required to complete a comprehensive bias training program, not the one-day departmental version everyone complained through, but a 12-week external program with assessments. He was being transferred to a community liaison role for a minimum of 6 months, pending evaluation. His gun and badge remained, but his patrol assignment was suspended for the duration. Gerald, the union rep, said it was excessive. He said it twice. Dr. Caldwell let him finish both times. Then she looked at Hutchins. You have the right to appeal any part of this finding, she said. That process and its timeline are documented in what you've been given. I want to make sure you understand that nothing in this outcome is punitive for its own sake. She paused. The job of this office is not to end careers. It is to make sure the people this department is supposed to protect can actually trust it. Sometimes those two things are in conflict. This is one of those times. Gerald started to say something. Hutchins stopped him. I'm not appealing, Hutchins said. The room was quiet. Gerald looked at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. Dale. I said I'm not appealing. He looked at Dr. Caldwell when he said it. She held his gaze steadily, the way she had held it on the sidewalk in the rain 3 weeks ago, and he understood now what that steadiness had cost her, not just that morning, but across a whole career's worth of mornings just like it. "Okay," she said simply. The community liaison office was a converted storage room on the first floor with a window that faced the parking structure. Hutchins reported there on Monday morning with a coffee and a box of his desk things, and the particular feeling of a man who has arrived somewhere he did not plan to go and is not yet sure what to do with himself in it. By 10 o'clock he had his first scheduled meeting, a neighborhood council representative from the east side named Darnell Webb, who had been trying to get someone from the department to attend their monthly meeting for 8 months and kept getting referred to other offices. Hutchins called him and introduced himself and said he'd be there. There was a pause on the line. "You actually coming?" Darnell Webb said. "Yes," Hutchins said. Another pause. "All right then." He hung up and sat in the small room with the parking structure view and the institutional carpet and the sound of the building around him, and he thought about 19 years spent developing what he had called instincts,